April 4th, 1968, Memphis, Tennessee. Dr. Martin Luther King is standing on the balcony of the Lorraine Motel, a visionary leader at the height of his influence, the voice of a generation fighting for justice. A single gunshot pierces the air, and Dr. King collapses, forever silencing a powerful champion for equality. The photo is etched in America's memory for eternity. The official story points the finger at a petty criminal named James Earl Ray, a lone gunman with a racist motive. But what if that's just a smokescreen to hide a twisted, terrifying truth? In part 1 of USA vs. MLK, we shattered the accepted narrative. We exposed how the FBI, under its ruthless director J. Edgar Hoover, waged an all-out war against Dr. King. Constant surveillance, blackmail, and dirty tricks were meant to discredit and silence him, to tear down a giant among men. They even went as far as to try to push Dr. King to take his own life with a sordid letter and audio tape. Then finally, a well-placed shot and a convenient suspect. A simple conclusion that raises far too many questions. Did James Earl Ray, a small-time crook, truly act alone? What secrets did the 1999 jury uncover, leading them to believe in a far-reaching conspiracy against Dr. King? And why did the government seem so eager to silence his voice? This story isn't just about how Martin Luther King died, but why? Who wanted him silenced? And what did they stand to gain? Lies, manipulation, a web spun from the very top. What shocking secrets lie at the core of this sordid tale? What happens when the powers sworn to protect become those responsible for the greatest of evils? There's a reason that the 1999 jury decided that this assassination was a conspiracy that included multiple government agencies. It's time to examine the evidence and find out why. The second part of the USA vs. MLK story blows this case wide open. The truth will shake you, but facing it is the only way forward. Let's start by examining what they tell us in all the history books, because the official story about the assassination doesn't even hold up. What we've been told is that James Earl Ray hides in a rooming house bathroom, fires the shot, drops his rifle like a calling card, and then starts running. A massive manhunt, a dramatic arrest, just like other classic assassin tales from our history. Ray pleads guilty. No trial, no fighting for his innocence. He essentially throws his life away and locks himself in prison for nearly a century. But what many don't know is just 3 days later, Ray claims that he didn't do it. He says his lawyer, Percy Foreman, pressured him into a confession. Who's this Foreman, you might ask? Interestingly, he's the lawyer who also defended Jack Ruby, the man accused of killing JFK's assassin, Lee Harvey Oswald. Coincidence? Maybe, maybe not. The more threads you pull, the more tangled this story gets. It turns out that a Texas oil billionaire, H.L. Hunt, was in contact with J. Edgar Hoover right after Dr. King's death. Hunt's right-hand man claims he was sent to Percy Foreman, Ray's lawyer, with a bribe. $125,000 to get Ray to take that plea deal and not go to trial. That happens to line up perfectly with what Ray said, himself, of course. Why would a petty criminal turn down his chance at a trial? Was he afraid? Was his life threatened? Or maybe the whole arrest was carefully staged? After all, why leave your murder weapon, complete with fingerprints, conveniently lying around? And those eyewitnesses who saw Ray running? Many others saw different things, painting a much less clear picture. How did Ray evade the FBI's manhunt for so long? How did he get the money and fake passports to end up in London? There are so many unanswered questions and strange coincidences surrounding this case. So many that, decades later, in 1999, a US jury actually agreed that a conspiracy existed, that government agencies were involved in Dr. King's assassination. This isn't just a fringe theory anymore. A court of law looked at the evidence and saw something truly sinister. But to grasp how this could even happen, how figures within our government could be accused of such a monstrous act, we need to take a look at things from a different perspective. And that means looking at the story of James Earl Ray himself. Because the man accused of taking down a giant insists he's not the cold-blooded killer they paint him to be. The story of Ray and Raoul. Ray spins a complex tale. He claims that back in 1967, while in Montreal, he met a mysterious figure who called himself Raoul. This Raoul, he says, wasn't just some stranger, but the mastermind behind the assassination, while Ray was just an unwitting pawn. According to Ray, he never even fired the fatal shot, only admitting to being partially responsible without knowing it. It hints at a conspiracy far darker than anyone expected. But who was this Raoul? Ray's story stretches back even further, to his escape from prison the year before the assassination. Hidden in an empty box, he regained his freedom, and allegedly met this man, Raul. They became business partners, trafficking guns to Cuban militants on American soil. Raul, Ray claims, was generous. He provided money, supplies, even the infamous white Mustang we've heard so much about. And this is where things get particularly strange. Raul, he says, instructed him to buy a specific rifle, the exact same rifle later found near the crime scene. Then, he was told to reserve a room at Jim's Grill, opposite the Lorraine Motel, for a meeting with the Cubans. The same room overlooking that infamous balcony. Ray claims that his job was simply to serve as Raul's driver for the meeting with the Cubans. So he claims that he never actually went up to the room. But then, a gunshot. The shot that changed America forever. He panicked, seeing Raul fleeing. Then they sped off. At the time, Ray says he only thought that the gun deal had gone bad. It's when they're just outside Memphis, Ray says, that Raul vanished, leaping from the Mustang, never to be seen again. On the radio came the news. King was dead, and police were on the lookout for a man in a white Mustang. That's when Ray says the painful truth dawned on him. He'd been set up. He fled to Atlanta, meeting a contact known only as Fat Man, another shadowy figure who supplied fresh money and false passports. Desperate and on the run, he used these to slip out of the country, ending up in London, where the net finally closed around him. You might be thinking, of course Ray's going to say that. Just the lies of a guilty man facing life in prison. Ray's story seems almost too outlandish, a tangle of unknown conspirators and shadowy deals. Yet, as we'll see, there's an unsettling amount of evidence to support his unbelievable tale. But before we dive into those murky waters, let's examine every crack in the official story. Because if Ray isn't the lone wolf killer we think he is, the truth must lie somewhere in those inconsistencies. And they are rather glaring. Things that make the official story very hard to believe. The bullet was never matched to the gun. Ballistics testing is an important part of any shooting investigation. Matching the bullet to the gun is forensics 101. Yet, the bullet that killed Dr. King was never linked to Ray's rifle. Omitting this test wasn't just sloppy, it was shocking. Consider this. If Ray had fought for a trial, ballistic proof would have been essential, which makes that hasty plea deal seem all the more convenient for those who wanted him locked away fast. Ray was no gun expert, or even a good shot. The official story paints Ray as a deadly marksman. Yet, the person who sold Ray the gun recalled that he bought the wrong ammunition, and that he didn't seem to know much about guns at all. Even more revealing, Ray barely qualified for his military service during World War II, scoring abysmally on his marksmanship tests. He wasn't a trained killer, he was just a patsy. The missing fingerprints. And if Ray had spent time in that grimy boarding house, wouldn't physical evidence be everywhere? Yet his fingerprints were suspiciously absent from the room, including the bathroom, where he supposedly fired the shot from. This aligns oddly well with his claim of never setting foot near the alleged crime scene. The impossible shot. Even assuming Ray was in that bathroom, the shot itself seems improbable. To get to the window, he'd have to stand in the bathtub, contorting himself at an awkward angle. But wait, it gets even more tricky. A massive tree stood directly in the line of fire that completely blocked any possible shot across the street. Coincidentally, this tree was immediately cut down by the Memphis Police Department the same night as the assassination to help with the investigation, or so they say. Many witnesses say that the shot came from the bushes. We're told that Ray fled the boarding house in full view, yet dozens of witnesses paint a very different picture. They insist that the fatal shot came from the bushes on the grounds of the boarding house, under the bathroom window, and describe seeing a short man run from the scene afterward, later blending into the crowd. Remarkably, one witness was actually on the balcony of the Lorraine Motel right before the shooting. He got a look at the bathroom window where Ray was supposed to have been, and he didn't see anyone. He'd only walked a short distance when, moments later, the gunshot rang out. If this is true, Ray would have had to sprint into the bathroom, perform a near circus act to step into the bathtub, lean out the window and shoot the perfect shot through the tree in a matter of seconds. All of these witnesses were told by Memphis police that they were mistaken, and the shot came from the boarding house window. Not one person whose testimony contradicted the official story ever appeared in court in the original case. Does it seem like a genuine investigation when all the evidence pointing away from your main suspect is completely ignored? The convenient evidence drop. Then there's the supposed smoking gun evidence. The bundle containing the rifle and binoculars. Discarded steps away from the boarding house. Witness Guy Kneep claimed that this bundle was dropped a few minutes before the shooting by a man with a chunky build, unlike Ray, who was lean and slender. If this is true, it means crucial evidence was planted, perfectly positioned to be discovered by police and tie the crime to Ray's ties to US intelligence. The more you learn about this story, the more mysterious it gets. You see, James Earl Ray had some secret connections in his past. Believe it or not, Ray was once part of a military group called the Office of Strategic Services, which was a group that later became the CIA. So, he was probably used to hanging around with government agents, guys with nicknames like Raoul and Fat Man, and using fake identities and passports. And the mysteries continue. When Ray was in jail, he tried to break out many times, but he never got in trouble. Sounds strange, right? Like, he would actually get caught trying to escape, and then nothing much happened. It's as if someone important was looking out for him, making sure he stayed out of serious trouble. Strange things found in Ray's white Mustang. When FBI agent Don Wilson looked through the white Mustang James Earl Ray left behind, he found something incredibly fishy. So fishy, in fact, that he was afraid to report it to his fellow agents in the FBI. He found 2 slips of paper that are truly mind-bending and turned the official story on its head. The first slip had the phone number of the FBI's Atlanta field office on it. That's the place where they were running Operation Zorro, the team dedicated to destroying Martin Luther King. And the second piece? It's a torn-up page from a 1963 Dallas, Texas phone book. This page lists names of people with the last name Hunt, a big deal because H.L. Hunt lived in Dallas, and scribbled on it is the name Raoul with the numbers 214 and a phone number LA 84775. This phone number was for the Vegas Club, a nightclub in Dallas, formerly owned by Jack Ruby. You know, the same Jack Ruby who was connected to another big case, the JFK assassination. Don't forget, Ray's first lawyer was also Jack Ruby's lawyer. Strange, indeed. Why on earth did Ray have the FBI Atlanta field office's phone number in his car? The same office that was trying to destroy Dr. King? And the same people who sent him the infamous self-harm letter? And what's up with writing the name Raoul and a number that leads straight to Jack Ruby's nightclub? When Agent Don Wilson found these clues, he was terrified and didn't tell the FBI about them for over 30 years because he worried about a secret link between Ray and the FBI. Don Wilson said that back then, the agents he knew in the FBI were not good guys. They were racist, corrupt liars. These words echo what Arthur Murtaugh, another ex-FBI agent who worked on Operation Zorro, said about the FBI not liking Dr. King because he was an N-word, and that the agents that he was working with on this particular squad had been brought up to believe that all black people were dangerous. It's like the FBI had a big problem with anyone who wanted to make things better for black Americans, or just black Americans in general. This already strange and confusing story gets even weirder the day Dr. King was killed. Hold on to your seats, because on the day of the assassination, the black policemen and firemen were told to go home. At that time in Memphis, Tennessee, there weren't a lot of black policemen or firemen. But somehow, the few that were there were oddly ordered to be off duty right before the shooting. Specifically, the day before the assassination, the 2 black firemen, Norval Wallace and Floyd Newsom, who worked at a fire station with a clear view of the Lorraine Motel, were told not to come to work the next day. And, even stranger, Ed Reddit, a black detective who was actually supposed to help watch Dr. King, was suddenly called off the job. About an hour before King was shot, the FBI told the local police that there was going to be an attempt on Detective Reddit's life too. So they sent him home to be safe. That warning about Ed Reddit being in danger turned out to be fake. Could it just have been a trick to get him away from protecting Dr. King, or witnessing something he shouldn't have? Right when all this was happening, someone else made a fake emergency call on the other side of town, making the police go over there instead of being anywhere near the Lorraine Motel. It's super strange that both the black firemen and the black policemen who could have been near Dr. King were sent away with weird excuses right at the critical moment. Seriously, who could order both the black firemen and policemen off their posts? Well, the chief of the Memphis Police and Fire Departments used to be an FBI agent. The chief of the Memphis Police and Fire Departments at the time was a guy named Frank Holloman. Now, before he became the chief, he worked at the FBI for over 25 years. He was very close to FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover because he worked directly under him in Washington. Holloman also ran the FBI's Atlanta field office at one time, the headquarters of Operation Zorro, the office dedicated to destroying Dr. King, and the office whose phone number James Earl Ray happened to have in his white Mustang on the day of the assassination. Now, why would someone move from a 25-year career in the FBI to being the police and fire chief in Memphis, Tennessee? It's kind of like going from being a C-level executive at a national company to suddenly becoming a floor manager at a local store. But this was the guy leading both the firefighters and the police in Memphis. Someone who could have easily ordered the black firemen and policemen off the job on that fateful day. When Holloman became fire and police chief, he left no doubt about his allegiances. He said that his first priority was to ensure that there was always a two-way street between the Memphis Police Department and the FBI. Remember Ron Adkins, the guy who claimed that his family was part of the conspiracy in part 1 of this story? He shared under oath that Clyde Tolson, Hoover's right-hand man, told his father that Billy Kyles, Jesse Jackson, and Solomon Jones were secretly informants, working for the FBI, and getting paid by none other than Frank Holloman. Adkins testified that Holloman had them directly under his thumb. That's right. The same Holloman who was now in charge of keeping Memphis safe was the one controlling these supposed informants when he was in the FBI. Was there a secret plan being cooked up behind the scenes? Something that had started way back in the FBI's offices? Was Holloman put in place by the FBI in case their self-harm letter didn't work, and they had to take more drastic actions? The questions continue. Another group that was protecting Dr. King was sent away. The previous march in Memphis had spiraled into violence, compelling Dr. King to meet with the local Black Power group, known as the Invaders, in hopes of aligning them with his mission of nonviolence. In an attempt to solidify this alliance, King's group presented an offer to cover the cost of accommodations for the leaders of the Invaders, securing a sense of commitment and partnership. John Smith of the Invaders found himself staying just a few doors down from King, in room 315, after being handed a check for $10,000 by Dr. King himself, to ensure security and peace at the upcoming march. Yet the narrative took an unexpected turn when, around 5:30 p.m., Charles Izzy Harrington of the Invaders encountered a puzzling scenario that seems to defy explanation. He was confronted by a hotel staff member with a message that abruptly severed the support Dr. King had just affirmed. The Invaders were informed that their accommodations were no longer covered due to Dr. King ceasing payment of their hotel bill. Remember, this was right after Dr. King had handed the Invaders a check for $10,000. It didn't make any sense. The motel worker who delivered the message said that the orders came from Reverend Jesse Jackson, whom Harrington spotted in the parking lot, conspicuously glancing at his watch. Confused and angry, the Invaders hastily vacated the hotel by 5:50 p.m., a mere 11 minutes before tragedy struck that evening. The sudden eviction of the Invaders, particularly in the shadow of Dr. King's commitment to their cause, raises a multitude of questions. Was Reverend Jackson under orders to undermine the alliance between Dr. King and the Invaders, and remove even more potential witnesses? The story gets even stranger. Dr. King's motel room was moved to a perfect spot for the plot. Did you know that Dr. King's room was actually changed before the assassination? According to investigator William Pepper, Dr. King was initially supposed to stay in a more secluded room in the motel, room 202, but he was moved to room 306, which had an exposed balcony, after the owner of the hotel received a call from someone in Dr. King's organization requesting the change. Ron Adkins, under sworn testimony, named Jesse Jackson as the person who ordered the change in room. Adkins stated that O.Z. Evers, another FBI operative, had contacted Walter Bailey, the then owner of the Lorraine Motel, indicating that Jesse was coming to see him. He then said that Jesse went down there and talked to the man and moved Dr. King up into room 306. This maneuver, according to Adkins, was executed under the directives of Fire and Police Chief, former FBI agent and friend to J. Edgar Hoover, Frank Holloman. Again, under oath, Adkins recalls Holloman's chilling words about Dr. King. "I want the son of a bee shot. Shoot the son of a bee in the mouth." If these claims are true, it raises serious questions about the involvement of Reverend Jesse Jackson and several other members of the inner circle in the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King. Ron Adkins' testimony about the setup. But why should we listen to Ron Adkins? How could he possibly know so much? Well, his father, Russell Adkins Sr., was a notorious leader within the Ku Klux Klan and the Dixie Mafia, with deep connections to the FBI. Ron testified under oath that he saw his father taking money from none other than J. Edgar Hoover's right-hand man, Clyde Tolson. He claims this money was funneled straight to FBI informants like O.Z. Evers, Solomon Jones, Billy Kyles, and, most shockingly, Jesse Jackson. After his father's death, Adkins says his family continued working with the FBI, playing a direct role in the plot to kill Dr. King. He alleges that his family, along with Kyles and Jackson, were the ones who orchestrated events to put Dr. King in the right place, at the right time for the assassination. Adkins remembers overhearing his mother make the call to O.Z. Evers. Billy Kyles was instructed to get Dr. King outside that door at straight up 6 o'clock, and make damn sure it wasn't a minute late. And as we now know, King stepped out right before 6, the fatal shot ringing out just a moment later. He goes even further, alleging that Solomon Jones admitted that it was him, Jackson, and Kyles who worked together to get Dr. King out of the room at the exact time, and that Kyles was the front man to get them out of the room. He continued. When the time started getting near, Jackson kept checking his watch and he carried his butt downstairs, where his butt wouldn't get shot. Remember Charles Izzy Harrington from The Invaders? His story matches up, having seen Jackson checking his watch anxiously in the parking lot moments before the shot. You can find Ron Adkins' full, shocking testimony in the links in description and read it for yourself. But Adkins isn't the only one with a bombshell story. Daniel Ellsberg's testimony. Daniel Ellsberg of Pentagon Papers fame swore in an affidavit that a group of off-duty and retired FBI agents, including a sharpshooter, were the real culprits. He claims this group acted under the direct orders of J. Edgar Hoover himself, and that the entire assassination was a meticulously orchestrated cover-up. Lloyd Jowers' testimony. But it was Lloyd Jowers, a seemingly ordinary man, who blew this case wide open. Jowers owned Jim's Grill, right beneath the rooming house where the shots supposedly came from. His background as a former Memphis cop made him a trusted figure among the orchestrators of this plot. One day, Jowers shocked the world. He went on the TV program Prime Time Live on December 16, 1993, confessing indirect involvement in a conspiracy to kill Dr. King. Jowers insisted that he was paid $100,000 for his role, and that James Earl Ray was just an innocent patsy. He said that a foreign-sounding man, possibly named Raoul, brought him a rifle and told him to hold it until arrangements were made. Jowers was also told that there would be a decoy to take the fall. Jowers was ready to name the actual shooter, but only if he was granted immunity. For the King family and their lawyer, William Pepper, this was enough. This was the opportunity they needed to reopen the case and demand the truth at long last. King versus Jowers. The King family, led by Dr. King's son, Dexter, and their tenacious lawyer, William Pepper, seized this opportunity. In 1998, they filed a wrongful death suit against Lloyd Jowers and other mysterious, unknown co-conspirators. The stage was set for a legal showdown that would shake America, or so you might think. William Pepper, who had once defended James Earl Ray, used his unique insight to tear apart the official story. Over 4 grueling weeks, he presented a mountain of evidence. Over 70 witnesses and thousands of pages of documents, including much of what we've uncovered already. New witnesses took the stand, each piece of their testimony chipping away at the official story. James McCraw, a taxi driver, described how Lloyd Jowers, the morning after the assassination, showed him a rifle in a box, claiming to have found it behind Jim's Grill. Betty Spates, a young waitress at Jowers' restaurant, agreed with this shocking picture. She saw Jowers rush in from the bushes after the shot, carrying a rifle, mud stains on his knees, hair disheveled. He hastily wrapped the weapon in a tablecloth, hiding it behind the counter. Witness after witness, detail after damning detail. The net was tightening. After all this, on December 8, 1999, the moment of truth arrived. The jury took only an hour to return a decision that should have sent shockwaves through the nation. They found Jowers guilty, unanimously affirming that he was part of a wide-ranging conspiracy to eliminate Dr. Martin Luther King. More importantly, they officially acknowledged what many long suspected: government agencies were involved. This was a legal landmark, a court of law declaring that the assassination of a beloved national leader was a government-sanctioned plot. So why isn't this a bigger part of our history? Why hasn't this victory led to the justice it so clearly demands? That's a question we have to confront, and it leads us to the most troubling part of this story. Who shot MLK? The King versus Jowers verdict may have been a victory, but it was a hollow one. Justice demands a name, a face to put to the crime. Who should we put behind bars instead of James Earl Ray? That's where the trial testimony becomes even more critical. Jowers claimed that the assassin was a Memphis police officer named Earl Clark, a man with a deadly reputation as the department's best marksman. He said Clark was part of a group planning the assassination at Jim's Grill, a shadowy cabal Jowers could only partially identify. Witnesses claimed that after the shot, Clark was seen fleeing the scene, scaling a wall near the motel and disappearing into a getaway vehicle. A classic hitman's escape. However, even more bombshell testimony emerged. Lenny Curtis, a man who worked at the Memphis shooting range, identified a different Memphis police officer, Frank Strausser. Curtis swore that he overheard Strausser vowing to blow MLK's MFing brains out. Worse, Curtis saw Strausser practicing his shooting all morning on the day of the assassination, with a rifle that looked exactly like the murder weapon. Curtis's story becomes even more troubling. He claimed Strausser stalked and threatened him for years after the assassination, even going so far as taking him on a menacing ride in the woods, while asking probing questions about what Curtis might know. When Curtis insisted that he knew nothing, Strausser's chilling reply was to keep it that way. So, which man pulled the trigger? Clark or Strausser? Could it have been both? William Pepper, guided by his decades investigating this case, believes this was a two-man team, with Frank Strausser as the sniper, and Earl Clark serving as his spotter. He asserts that Strausser and Clark worked under orders from a man whose name we all know very well by now, Chief of the Memphis Police and Fire Departments, and former FBI agent Frank Holloman. And that Holloman was acting on behalf of infamous FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover. The connections really aren't hard to follow once you can see through the smokescreen of the official story. The 1999 trial offered names, figures like Earl Clark and Frank Strausser, but justice isn't just identifying the man who shot the gun. It's about knowing the full truth, no matter how ugly. And here is where the story turns even darker, because Dr. King probably wasn't killed by the shot alone. Strong testimony suggests that Dr. King might not even have died from the gunshot. Lula Mae Shelby, a surgical aide at St. Joseph's Hospital where Dr. King was rushed, secretly shared a disturbing story with her family, including her son, Jonton. According to her, there was a flurry of activity to save Dr. King, when an orderly named John Billings left the room to find those in charge. Moments later, Shelby claims the chief of surgery, Dr. Breen Bland, burst in with two suited men. He ordered the medical staff out, yelling, "Stop working on that N-word and let him die." Then, an awful act that Shelby described with chilling detail, the men then spat on Dr. King, tore his ventilator off, and suffocated him with a pillow. This terrible story doesn't stand alone. It is supported by others. Ron Adkins, his testimony already shaking the foundation of this case, confirmed the existence of this backup plan. He claims to have been present when his father and older brother met with Chief of Surgery Bland and Frank Holloman, the powerful head of the police and fire departments. According to Adkins, while they were planning King's assassination, Bland offered a chilling guarantee, saying, "If he's not killed by the shot, just make sure he gets to St. Joseph Hospital, and we'll make sure he doesn't leave." When Billy Kyles told his version of the story, he mentioned that he personally instructed the ambulance to go to St. Joseph's Hospital, even though there was a better-equipped hospital just a few more moments away. So, the question looms, was there a desperate attempt to save Dr. King's life, snuffed out by those who swore to do no harm? This casts a whole new, sinister light on this tragedy. It means Dr. King's death was orchestrated from multiple angles. The alleged hitman, his spotter, those controlling the hospital, the police and fire departments, and of course, the FBI. They were all pieces in a larger, meticulously planned execution. The USA versus MLK. So there you have it. The facts of the case. Let's cut through all the fog and lay out what we know to be true for sure. We know that J. Edgar Hoover, consumed by hatred, unleashed the vast power of the FBI in a personal vendetta against Dr. Martin Luther King, seeking to break the man's spirit through psychological warfare and drive him to take his own life. We know that a former FBI special agent, who had been in charge of the office that was dedicated to destroying Dr. King, was the chief of fire and police in Memphis, Tennessee, at the time of the assassination. We also know for a fact that several strange orders were given to the black firemen and policemen that fateful day, so that they were not present at the time of the assassination, and that those orders had to have been given by someone who had power over both departments. Someone who knew, in advance, about the plot. We know that the very heart of Dr. King's inner circle was infiltrated by FBI informants, confirmed by their own files. Ernest Withers, famous civil rights photographer, is identified as one of the FBI collaborators. We also now know that there was one more FBI informant near Dr. King on that fateful day, Morrell McCullough, the man kneeling beside him in that famous photo. Lloyd Jowers claims that McCullough was at the meeting in Jim's Grill, where they planned the assassination. Arthur Murtaugh, an ex-Operation Zorro agent, states on the record that there were at least 17 informants feeding King's secrets back to Hoover. Who could be among the other 15? Ron Atkins testified under oath that O.Z. Evers, Billy Kyle, and Jesse Jackson were among these unknown informants, and that they manipulated events to ensure Dr. King was at the exact place, at the exact time, for the fatal shot. Eyewitness Charles Izzy Harrington, of The Invaders, tells a story about Jackson that is very similar to Adkins, saying that Jackson ordered the invaders to leave the motel, and that he was nervously waiting on the ground level, checking his watch, just moments before the assassination. We know, for sure, that the FBI wanted to replace Dr. King with a more compliant black leader who was under their control. Could they have achieved their goal with Jesse Jackson, who became King's de facto successor in the civil rights movement? Was this part of the plot? But how could Reverend Jesse Jackson, one of Dr. King's closest associates, be an FBI informant? It's really hard for many to believe. Well, we know for a fact that Jackson's son, Jesse Jackson Jr., was definitely an informant for the FBI. Could the apple have fallen right next to the tree? Knowing what you know now, with this tangled web exposed, it's easy to understand why the jury only took 1 hour to reach their unanimous verdict in the King versus Jowers case. King wasn't killed by James Earl Ray. It was a conspiracy. And it reached the very top, to those governmental agencies sworn to protect, not destroy. This is where William Pepper's relentless pursuit of the truth led him, allowing him to win this groundbreaking case. His books, Act of State, Orders to Kill, and The Plot to Kill King, lay out this investigation in even greater depth. You can dive deeper and hear the evidence firsthand by subscribing to Audible and using the link in the description below. With Audible, you can unlock the chilling facts and details of this case, including many more that we haven't had the time to touch upon here. But most importantly, by doing so, you'll be supporting the kind of work that pulls these hidden, true conspiracy stories out of the shadows, back into the light where they belong. Please subscribe using the link below. After the trial. After years of lies, the verdict in the King versus Jowers trial echoed like a thunderclap. Coretta Scott King herself spoke out, affirming that this was a far-reaching conspiracy. She said, "The jury was clearly convinced by the extensive evidence that local, state, and federal government agencies were deeply involved in the assassination." She continued that someone else, not James Earl Ray, was the shooter, and that Mr. Ray was set up to take the blame. What does this all mean? This makes you question everything that you think you know about our history. Remember that famous photo from Life magazine? That photo could also be another deception. We now know that Morrell McCullough, the kneeling man, was an FBI informant, and that Billy Kyles and Jesse Jackson, who are both said to be in that photo, were also more than likely FBI operatives as well. King was surrounded by traitors. Billy Kyles later told his story about the moment of the assassination, confirming that Jackson and Young were on the ground floor, Ralph Abernathy was still in the room, and Kyles was several steps away, towards the staircase, possibly because he knew what was to come. King was standing alone, joking with the men below, when he was shot. Kyles said that the famous photo was taken when all the men ran to the balcony after the shot, and they were answering the police, who had asked them where it came from. The direction of the official story, itself, is an act of misdirection. You just can't believe anything you hear or see offhand. We have to examine things for ourselves. So, knowing the truth, what can you do? First, share this video, along with part 1 of this story, with everyone you know. People need to know the truth about what happened to Dr. Martin Luther King. Even if you don't believe anything else, people need to know about the FBI's Operation Zorro, their attempt to drive him to take his own life, and the results of the 1999 trial. We need your help to correct the false narrative of history. We owe it to Dr. King to fight the lies that tarnish his memory. Always keep your eyes open for government overreach. This is about more than just one single tragedy. Remember COINTELPRO? It's officially over. But how do we truly know that the playbook has changed? That governments aren't still abusing their power to crush progressive voices? Knowledge will always be our best weapon. And most importantly, find out who Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. really was. His legacy isn't confined to a single "I have a dream" speech on a single day. He was a warrior for equality for all, and he fought for economic justice as fiercely as he opposed the Vietnam War. These stances made him deeply unpopular and a threat to those comfortable with the way things were. Question the official stories and history as it has been taught to you more often. As Winston Churchill famously said, "History is written by the victors." If you hunger for the unvarnished truth, use the Audible link below to delve into William Pepper's books. Not only will you uncover even more shocking revelations, but you'll empower us to keep exposing the hidden conspiracies the powerful would rather conceal. Please like this video, subscribe to our channel, and continue to join us on a journey to illuminate the dark corners of history, because the search for truth never ends. Thank you for staying with us, and stay tuned to this channel for the next incredible case of true conspiracy stories.